interview to Swarajya, a right-wing magazine and online platform over the weekend, the Prime Minister sounded pretty gung-ho about the economy, though much of the data does not match his enthusiasm. He said, for instance, that foreign investment is at an all-time high, but data that just came in from the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion shows that FDI is actually at a 5-year low. Not just FDI, but also overseas investors have pulled out nearly 48,000 crores from the Indian markets since the beginning of this year. That's the biggest outflow in 10 years. And then there are jobs. The PM insists more than 70 lakh jobs were created in the formal sector last year based on EPFO data. However, he goes on to admit that there is a lack of data on jobs. Other experts have questioned this EPFO data as misleading, but we'll have more on that later. Then look at the latest core sector growth numbers that came just yesterday. They show that this is at a 10-month low. The good news, however, is that manufacturing is up. The other good news is the GDP for the last quarter, which at 7.7% has been the highest in 8 quarters, though the overall GDP projection for this year at 6.7% is the lowest since 2015. The rupee, in case you haven't noticed, has touched a historic low last week, and India continues to face the challenge from high oil prices. So where exactly does that leave the Indian economy at this point? We have a special panel of economists and experts joining us, no politicians this evening. Ila Patnaik, Professor of Economics at the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, is here in the studio with us. Anil Khaitan, the President of the PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Dr. Anil Kumar, Associate Professor at the Sri Ram College of Commerce. Well-known economist Arun Kumar here in the studio with us, and Shubhamay Bhattacharya of the Business Standard joining us here as well. Ila Patnaik, first question to you. If you had to give us a macro view of the health of the Indian economy today in a few short sentences, what would that be?
So, very recently we are seeing a few things pick up, like sales of companies and exports. But I think what is happening is a two-track path. One is that the formal sector growth, which we are seeing in the sales of companies and perhaps in the job data, if we were to believe that job data, they seem to be growing a little faster than they were a year ago, but the informal sector has had a shock, and that's not surprising given the GST that we've had, given the demonetization that we had, that it's really something that's hit the economy, which has put it on these two tracks. Now, in the long run, very, very long run, this is something that is perhaps good for an economy, because you do want to move from low productive enterprises and jobs to high productive ones, but in the short run it is a very, very, very painful process. And I think if we recognize the fact that there is this pain and this is what's going on, if this is an accurate picture, I mean, considering that data is very difficult, but if this is an accurate picture and if this is what is going on, then we need to find ways of handling it, of reducing the pain, maybe reskilling people, relocating people, maybe having industry, help industry work through this. But with the financial sector the way it is, the banking sector particularly, the NPAs, the slowdown in the growth of credit, I'm not sure how well placed we are at the moment to be able to handle.
So let's talk about individual sort of sectors. Then let's look at FDI, for instance, Anil Khaitan. When you look at the FDI numbers, and today Amitabh Kant was at pains to say that, look, no, FDI is actually doing pretty well. And I'll ask Shubhamay to break that down for us, why there's a contradiction and how he's interpreting the data and what we are seeing in the numbers. But one of the things you've seen experts say about FDI, for instance, is that this shows that the sentiment about investment, private investment, still isn't good. There has been, things have eased up as far as ease of doing business is concerned, but it's not enough, and a lot more needs to be done. Do you agree with that, or what's the sense you're getting? Are we in a better place today than, say, we were a year ago?
Well, Nidhi, I think in terms of our economy, revving up, I think we're doing quite well. I just have two logics for this. If you see the growth of all the commercial vehicles and the automobiles, they're growing at about 18 to 20%. Even the FMCG sector is growing. Now, where would this growth come from if there was no demand from the economy? So I feel the government has spent a lot of money on rural infrastructure, because that's where India lives, and once you increase their income power, demand automatically generates in the economy and the growth comes. So I'm of a firm believer that any economy goes or it grows on basically two legs. One is consumerism and one is investments. If there is demand, there will be supply. So I feel that the economy is on the right track. It is growing robustly, but there is one big negative. We are not taking advantage of the growing world market in terms of exports. Because if you see the absolute value of exports, in 2014 it was $302 billion. It went to 270 billion or something in the next year, and now it's landed up with 305 or 306.
So you clearly feel that things have turned around today, as opposed to a lot of the doom and gloom that people were talking about a year ago. Arun Kumar, we haven't talked in a long time, and you've come so many times to talk about the way things are as far as the economy is concerned. Are you feeling a little more optimistic?
Well, things may be a little better 1 year down the GST, but still they're not well enough, As was said earlier, it's the...
What do the FDI numbers tell you, for example?
Well, the FDI numbers may have gone up a little bit, but the point really is that the, millionaires from India are going out, So in a sense, if you look at it, what's the business climate? The ease of doing business has not come with GST. There have been more than 350 notifications within 1 year, almost one a day. There's a lot of confusion. The essential aspects of GST, like reverse charge, like GSTR2, those are all postponed. The e-way bill was postponed because it wasn't working very well. So the ease of doing business is not there. Now, if ease of doing business is not there, then you will not get FDI coming in the same rate as was coming in earlier. The rate of growth has slowed down. The FII is going out because of the external situation, where in America the growth has been much higher. So therefore there's a money flowing out from the stock markets and others. Okay, so in other words, what I'm trying to argue is the rate of growth of the economy, if you include the informal sector, the data for the government, the data the government has is for the formal sector, and that data is used for quarterly projections. That may be showing 7%, but the informal sector, if you look at the MG and REGS numbers and others, that may have declined by 10%. So the rate of growth of the economy would be not more than 1% at this point of time, rather than 7%, because that is calculated.
You in fact have expressed concerns repeatedly about the collapse of the informal sector, which you mentioned as well, ever since demonetization happened. Has there been no sign of a change in all this time, or is there just no credible way to measure this?
Government doesn't collect data every year. It's a 3 to 5 years time gap that this data is collected. But if you look at MG and REGS and its rise, it reflects people going back from urban areas to rural areas and seeking jobs. Similarly, the demand collapse for agricultural produce suggests that the unorganized sector is not able to demand enough, and that's why the agricultural prices have fallen and farmers are not getting the prices that they should be getting. So there's enough evidence to suggest that the informal sector remains in a crisis. Another aspect of GST is that even though those below 20 lakh have been left out of GST, those from 20 lakh to 1.5 crore are in the composition scheme, but who will buy from them? The large scale sector would not buy because they'll not get input credit. They'd have to pay reverse charge. Okay, reverse charge has been suspended, but input credit is not available at the moment. So they'll prefer to go to the organized sector. So organized sector growth will go up, but the unorganized sector growth will not pick up. And that's where the rate of growth has not picked up.
And so Shubhamay, what happens is data actually can be very confusing because it's interpreted often by people depending on their points of view, etc. It can be interpreted in 100 different ways. What is all this conflicting data telling you? When you see 7.7% in the quarter but 6.7% for the year, you're seeing manufacturing going up, but you're seeing the core sector at a 10-month low. What does all this mean?
Well, it simply means, Nidhi, that first of all, this data is not unusual. If you say that the Indian GDP data at 7% is not reliable, it wasn't reliable earlier too. So it's not about the data having suddenly become all right. The problem is that India economy, naturally being a huge economy, throws up large number of data points. Not all data points at any point of time would show one direction. They become particularly complicated, as has happened in several times in the past in the Indian economy, whenever the cycle changes. So whenever we go from a boom to a depression, recession, or we turn from recession back towards a growth,
you'll find conflicting numbers.
The data tends to be conflicting. So that's not surprising. That is what will happen. So you can take any number of data points, slice them through. In fact, Ilaya herself has written several times on it, and she would be able to say that those data, depending on who is interpreting them, would tend to show at which point the economy is in terms of the recovery. The point that's coming out clearly is that there is a recovery. what you're trying to figure out, which is the right thing to do, is what extent the recovery has progressed, whether is it because of the steps that the government has taken, or whether is it despite the steps the government has taken. I think that is that I think is the central issue out here, and I think that's what we are trying to see. Those facts. So to look at that, we need to look at which are the steps or which are the factors which the government has in its control. The government of India doesn't control too many things. For instance, despite doing MSP, it doesn't really manage to procure all the grains and crops that it promises to raise. It
but
announces.
You have, for instance, an acute agrarian crisis, which
That's
nobody denies. Exactly.
And the government doesn't reach there. Now, for instance, one of the data points that was put out by Shamu Ghosh today in SBI, which is true, that the agri GDP deflator has come down. Now, that's the area where governments, not only the center, I mean, the center has hardly anything, even the states don't have much of a control. And that is why you see wide varying patterns of agricultural prosperity and depression.
What about things like NPAs? Okay, what about things like and you brought up that point, why are millionaires leaving India? Why are people taking their money out of the country?
Absolutely. Now, let's look at the NPA problem. The NPA is one area where the government should and does have control, in the sense that it's a sector capital. So, in terms of land, labor and capital is one sector where the government definitely has lots of levers in its control. So, if things had gone wrong, that also was because of the government's directed economy, directed system of banking. You can't have a public sector dominated banking and say that we will not be controlling it. Somebody somewhere would obviously start saying that you give loan to X and don't give loan to Y. Don't give loan to Y. And that's exactly what has been happening. Now, when that process is being, unshackled and IBC has come in, you find issues.
But let me just take, I know Professor Arun Kumar has a counter to that. Just give me a second. I want to ask Anil Kumar, because he is with the Sri Ram College of Commerce. And one of the things that often viewers write to us about, Mr. Kumar, is just about jobs. And I just want to get a sense from you that what are your students telling you about their employment opportunities? Are things any better? Are they getting better? What's the feedback that you're getting from the campuses?
I think so far jobs are concerned, jobs are being created. Just imagine the economy is growing at the rate of 7.7% in the last quarter. That means the growth is there. When growth is there, employment will come up. At the same time, if you look at the different scenario of the economy, you will find that under different missions of the government, for example, ease of doing business. One can start business in just one day. It takes just 24 hours to register a company, never thought of before. This is one aspect. The other aspect is that so many other missions, for example, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, which has been undertaken. And I was amazed to see that almost every household, recently I was in Uttarakhand, very remote state of the country, and almost every household in the village has a toilet. It has led to a social transformation, and from the social transformation, the economic growth is taking place, the jobs are being created. Look at the Mudra scheme, which has been initiated by the government. Under the Mudra scheme, it's very easy to take up the loan. When a small business can be set off, it will give employment to at least 3-4 persons. So that way the employment opportunities are coming up. It's for the people to take advantage of those opportunities. Under financial inclusion scheme also, 31 crore accounts have been opened in a matter of 4 years. And in those accounts, 70,000 crore of money has been deposited, and the transactions are also being undertaken in most of those accounts. So that way I can see the change taking place everywhere, and the fruit of development is coming down to the people at large.
Okay.